And so I don't question anymore my life. When I had my early awakening, when I first discovered I was a medium and I was a finance manager at the same time, I questioned why this path. I don't get it. I no longer question it. I'm far on that, and that's why I mentor and coach in this space, which is probably why you do it as well, Adam. You're out of the questioning the why, and now the vehicle is the how. How am I showing up in the world? How do I write my next book? How do I, travel and speak more? So it's more the vehicle of how you move off the why once you follow and trust the synchronistic events. That is your why. The why is the synchronicity.
Welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast, where we talk about everything from spirituality, self-development, relationships, mindfulness, wellness, and everything that will help you embrace all that you are so you can expand into the best version of yourself. All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. So the guest on this episode is a woman who has navigated her way from a corporate leader to intuition expert. For the last 12 years, she has spiritualized her life studying from some of the world-renowned experts in their fields, cultivating her mediumship and mindfulness practices from Arthur Findlay College, Esalen, and the Omega Institute, just to name a few. The founder of Empowering Intuition, she is an expert psychic medium, spiritual teacher, mentor, intuitive guide, executive coach, and most recently, author. She is committed to empowering women to honor the truth of who they truly are and transition into expanded, authentic, and fully lived lives. So coming all the way from Australia, it is a pleasure to introduce you to Sheila Vijeyarasa.
Yeah, well done, Adam. I go by
Okay.
Sheila V. It's way easier. Sheila
All
V.
right. Well, Sheila V, welcome to the Embrace and Expand podcast.
Thanks, Adam. It is such a pleasure to be here.
Well, I recently discovered you through the Shift Network when you did a free webinar training of connecting with your spirit guides. And as soon as I went through that little webinar, I knew I had to have you on the show because there's just so much wisdom that you carry that I know all of the listeners are going to greatly enjoy. So for those listeners that aren't familiar with you, why don't you just take a few moments to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what brought you here?
Yeah, so I am passionate about helping women and men in their spiritual awakening process because when I had my awakening, it was very difficult. So I'm an ex-corporate executive, I'm an ex-finance director, and I had my awakening and my life at that moment didn't make any sense anymore. I was like, I don't think I'm meant to have this corporate career. I think I'm meant to move into tapping into my intuitive abilities, serving, humanity in that way. This old life made no sense. And so that's why I wrote my book, Brave, many years later. So Brave, Courageously Live Your Truth is very much a journey of mastering, the spiritual path. And I call it the courageous path in my book because I think to walk your spiritual path, you need a ton of courage. And so what I'm passionate about in my programs, I guide people through activating and connecting to their spirit guides and activating all their psychic abilities and also learning about how to awaken and how to awaken powerfully. And then I also teach about manifesting. And in that program, I've become a trauma-informed facilitator, inner child therapist. So I combine healing and manifesting together because I realize they go together. Unless we heal ourselves, we can't hold the energy of believing we deserve it. So that program is another one I love dearly. And I do one-on-one coaching. And interestingly enough, Adam, every time I'm more courageous in my life, so many things open up. So I'm now a keynote speaker on corporate stages and I do corporate training. And so, I'm a real believer and I mentor in this way. Whatever you want to create, we can create it. We just need to believe we're worthy of it and heal our trauma and also really spiritualize our life. We need to connect to our guides, realize there is a whole team on the other side waiting for us to work with us.
That's such a beautiful story. And I really, really enjoyed that you touched on the fact that you have to heal yourself before you can try manifesting. And I think so many people, ever since The Secret came out, it was like, it made people just believe that, well, if I think of this, then I can make it happen. Or if I believe in it enough, then it's just going to attract to me. When the reality is, if you have karmic blockages, if you have limiting beliefs, if you have these things on your lens of projection, if you will, they're going to stop those things from being able to come to you.
100%. And many of us have blind spots. And me personally, I did many years of spiritual bypassing. So I would have this kind of life, and on weekends I would do workshops and meditate and read oracle cards and things like that. And even I was watching clients spiritually bypass as well, and I was watching them come back to me reading after reading with no real change, but just wondering and asking, when will I meet the one? When will my purpose turn up? Should I take the next job or not? And I realized people were not healed enough to tap into their intuition. They had many limiting beliefs about their worthiness of meeting their soulmate partner. And there wasn't an awareness that that was the actual work that they needed to do. And that's why I've written programs around this, because I was lost and confused in the desert for a long time. And I was like, so I'm the teacher to many that I wish I had for myself. And I think that's the way of the wounded healer. We take our wounds and we turn them into wisdom. That's very much been my path. So yeah, Adam, unless we believe it, unless we know that we are worthy of it, it doesn't turn up. And I know I transmuted this because for many years I was in toxic relationships. And finally, I cracked the code and I did all this deep, deep work. And then I manifested my soulmate and we got married last year. So, I have living embodied truth that once we believe it, it shows up, and very quickly. So this guy, he came into my life very quickly when I got into alignment of my worthiness of this kind of love. And so, yeah, it's so important we understand that.
Yeah. Just at how beautiful this conversation is already early on, and so much alignment with my belief systems as well when it comes to coaching and helping people, is that it's really having that journey back to self, uncovering that full, authentic expression of who you truly came here to be. Then you can be that. But until you can embody that authentic expression, it's just like you're almost treading water. And I also found myself very much early on doing the exact same thing, learning meditation, learning Reiki, going to retreats, feeling like I was doing the work when really the work didn't start until I acknowledged that I was actually the problem.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
the one standing in my own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're a coach, Adam. I'm a coach, and coaches. I reckon we've got we got a tough path, very tougher than average, because we have to hold ourselves to the accountability to the standards that we teach. And if we don't, there's an incongruency. And I find if I'm not congruent, clients don't get breakthroughs. For any coach or mentor out there, you have to be working with a therapist or somebody fortnightly or weekly, especially when you're going through transformation. So I still have my own teachers, even though I'm a spiritual teacher, because every time, I'm called to up level, I need to up level. And the tests don't end. The test around boundaries and the test around my self-worth are always there, but I'm having to show up for myself. And like I said, if I don't, I can feel an incongruence of my message that I'm putting out into the world, and people can feel that back. So we're very visible when you're a mentor and coach. You have to kind of walk your talk.
Exactly. So since you have truly tapped into your intuition in that way, and really even gone beyond that with your psychic mediumship, what would you say was kind of that breaking point where you heard that inner voice telling you that, hey, this is really where the work lies?
Oh, but in terms of when I realized that I needed to start to do some inner work, right? There was the inner voice, Adam. The inner voice was screaming to me for years. I find it's when the outer world cracks. So it's the dark night. I had the inner voice going, leave this relationship. Why are you still here? I feel like our intuition is always speaking to us. Some of us, and I'll speak for myself, are very good at squashing the voice, ignoring the voice, pretending the voice doesn't exist. And so when I did this, then I manifested, a really proper dark night where I lost my job, my apartment flooded, a relationship ended, I broke my toe, all in 6 weeks. So it was a very short space of time as well. A dark night tends to be a cluster, a dense cluster of energy where everything breaks in our life to be rebuilt again. And so that's what happened to me. And so the inner voice was there. Once I broke down through the breakdown was when the rebuild happened, because It was actually an opportunity, considering everything had broken down. I could start from scratch with a relationship with myself. Look at the job. What did I want to do? And that's when I started my spiritual business. I broke my toe, physically forcing me to slow down. My apartment flooded, so I had leaky emotions. So if anything floods, it's leaking of emotions out into our world, unregulated. So for me, that was an important defining turning point where I had to stop and look at how I was living and how incongruent it was with my soul purpose and my soul contract. And that was the beginning of me getting really brave. I think the fact that we even manifest a dark night is courageous, because our higher self, our soul, knows we can handle it. Even if you're in the middle of the dark night and you're like, what on earth is this? I cannot handle this. There's something there that's saying, yes, you can. And then moving through it with the support of healers and teachers, counselors is so important. So does that answer your question? So that was a point where I was like, okay, I need to do some work.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a good case in point of where when we were presented with challenges in our lives, we wouldn't be presented with those challenges if the universe, the guides, whatever name you want to put on it, knew that we were strong enough. If it didn't think we were strong enough and we could handle it,
Yeah.
it wouldn't put that challenge in front of us. It's almost like it's always that test. How are you going to show up?
Yeah, yeah. And I've written about it in my book Brave, where it's called The Dark Night of Courage, this chapter. And I speak about, you get the test, but you get the support at the same time. But quite often we don't reach for the support or even see it as support. But at the same time as being tested, there is always support. One of the hallmarks is looking for the support around you. And sometimes that is the test itself. Sometimes, especially a lot of women are like, I can do it on my own. I was one of those independent kind of corporate women. And one of the dark night actually broke me, to even when my apartment flooded, I had to move out. And even asking people to come around and help me pack my apartment because I had a broken foot, that required humility. And I was just too proud to ask for help. So the universe was breaking me down, from a humility, egoic point of view.
Mm. And I also have found myself challenged with that, asking for help and believing that, oh, I can do it on my own. And I found that that actually came from a wounded inner child part of
Yeah.
that I was trying to show the world that I didn't need anybody else's support, because at certain points in my life when I needed that support, it wasn't actually there. So have
Yeah.
you found, you mentioned working with the inner child, that a lot of the things that people actually work through, or the patterns that continue to repeat, the limiting beliefs, stem from those childhood traumas?
100%. And they're very much the young version of ourselves, not even the teenage version. So definitely there's trauma around our adolescent years. And a lot of it is the growing pains. However, the trauma that can keep us really stuck is the stuff that happens, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And it tends to be around that 4, 5, 6, 7, when we actually quite cognitive and we have our first experience of being abandoned, or the first experience of realizing I'm alone in the world, or feeling alone, or the world is not safe, or I must be this version of myself to be lovable and worthy. And so I constantly have to go back to, and there tends to be one age that we can get quite locked into. For me, it's 7. And so when I'm having a lot of pain or issues come up, I bring in that 7-year-old and I speak to her, because I know that's the part of me that's feeling confused or fearful or sad. The adult version of me may not like the uncomfortable emotions, but I know that the inner child, the young version of me, is the one that's scared. And so learning to have a dialogue with that little girl or boy within us is such an important part of healing. And so, I've done plant medicine, many ceremonies on plant medicine. I've experienced toad. I've sat with shamans. I've had massive breakthroughs. However, it was the inner child work, the internal family systems work, family constellation, inner child work, understanding trauma, that helped me integrate ayahuasca, integrate toad. Without that, I wouldn't have really made the significant changes I've made in my life. I probably would have regressed than I did for quite a few years.
Thank you so much for touching on that point, because we've had a lot of guests on this podcast in season 2 that are either using plant medicines, our plant medicine mentors themselves, a shaman that I sat with in Peru came on to a couple of episodes ago. And integration has always been like the number one thing that continues to pop up. But how do you have integration if you don't actually have the context
Mm,
for what it is that you're going through? And I find that a lot of people want to jump into plant medicine ceremonies as this like quick fix. It's just going to change everything. And I'm going to have this breakthrough moment that's going to give me all of the ahas that I never need to. But what I found on my plant medicine journeys was that all they ever did was show me the way. They didn't
mm,
give me any answers.
mm.
Actually, my very first ceremony with Aya was incredibly frustrating because I asked her, like, what am I supposed to do with my life? And her answer was, you already know the answer.
Yeah.
It's like, okay,
Yeah,
thanks. Yes, okay,
yeah,
I
yeah.
do already know the answer, but I was looking for somebody else
To
to
tell,
give
yeah,
me that power, to tell
yeah,
me
yeah,
what it is that I need to do.
yeah, yeah. Oh, 100%. On my first ceremony, I was looking for me. Like, I can't even remember it. It was such a long time ago. I've kind of moved off that. And I got there and they showed me a picture of me and I was looking into a mirror. They go, there she is. She's been there the whole time. And I thought, I've come all the way into the Amazon jungle to look at myself in a mirror and go, this is who you are. You're already here. And I was like, what? How is this the answer? A bit like you're doing it. Like, you know the answer. You feel a bit ripped off. And then fundamentally, as a spiritual teacher, this is my take on ayahuasca and any plant medicines. You're going out into multi dimensions. You're traveling out into other dimensions, very high frequency dimensions, and you're making adjustments. The medicine and you are making adjustments in other dimensions. Your frequency is being lifted in other dimensions. You're jumping timelines. So when we come back into this third dimension, this fifth dimension, trying to bring back fifth dimensional consciousness into the third dimensional consciousness is where the challenges begin, because that is why we need integration. We've got to integrate all the changes out here into a new version of us here. So quite often after we experience ayahuasca and toad, we need to have a bit of the death and rebirth after it, and that's the integration, because we will be called to level up. So after I came back from my first ayahuasca journey, a week after I got back to Sydney, I went into my boss's office and I said to him, I want to do my corporate executive CFO role 4 days a week, not 5, which was a big ask because I was a director on a board. And he said yes. He was fantastic. He was aligned with he could see where I was going. And so I thought, okay, great. Everything's working out. I get to do my spiritual work full time 1 day a week, and I was going to do it on weekends. So in my mind, I thought 4 days of my corporate job, 3 days of my spiritual business. I was working 7 days a week. But that's when the work really began. That's when the ayahuasca really kicked in, because I then had to, all my inner child stuff came up, the worthiness of being a spiritual medium and a teacher, realizing I'd have to leave my corporate job properly a year later, writing the book. So all of the integration was about me actually finally showing up. And that's why I wrote my book called Brave, because you've got to be brave to make the changes and make them sustainable and permanent after you come back from ceremony. You can't go back to your old life. We can't have everything change if we're the same. We're not the same, but we need to put in place all the new habits and the rituals. Like if we were told to start drinking green juices, you're going to have to start drinking green juices and get fit and healthy. But what do we all do? I mean, I go back to coffee and chocolate, right? So it's like, no, you haven't learnt your lesson when you go back. So integration is the most important part of these plant medicine journeys, because that's where the actual change happens.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. If we're not willing to change, nothing will change.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's also a good case in point. And you touched on the need to ask for help. And I think that was one thing that I really took away in the webinar that you did with the Shift Network talking about spirit guides, is that they are there to help you, but you have to ask for that help.
Yep. It's the law of free will. So for those that are listening that may not have a full knowledge of spirit guides, and some listeners might have advanced knowledge, we all have a spirit team around us and they're with us from conception through to death. There are many different types of guides, and I teach this, and you can watch some videos on my Instagram if you'd like. Fundamentally, my favorite are the ancestor spirit guides, because they are the ones helping to break intergenerational trauma and amplify your intergenerational gifts and trauma, right, come through. You have a master guide that helps you, complete your soul contract. So once we have awakening, what most people feel is the master guide come in. And that's when they're like, what is this energy around me? I feel like I have a spirit guide. That's when we first hear the word spirit guide, yearn to reach for the guide. We first have a meditation that has the first encounter, and we reach and seek our first spiritual teacher to show us the way forward. So that's fundamentally what happens with our relationship with spirit guides. It's an ascension symptom. It's one of the steps through the awakening process that you need to take. It's a bit of a not negotiable, because your guides, and to your point, Adam, the guides are who you ask for support from. They are there to give us the answers. And when you do plant medicine, you connect to the guides very easily, but we can't be doing plant medicine every weekend. We need to be here having our own deep meditation practices. And I'm just finishing up teaching this 7-week course on the Shift Network. And the essence of the course is we're here to connect with our spirit guides 24 hours a day. It is just not on the meditation cushion. Connecting to our spirit guides, it's something we do in our sleep state. It's in our waking state. It's when we asking for signs from the universe and receiving the signs around the next step. So you start to realize when you have an awakening, the whole world is conspiring to help us move forward. And it's through the operation of our spirit guides. They're compressing time and space to allow for miracles to occur in our life. Now, the law of free will means we must ask for the miracle, and then we must receive the miracle with gratitude. And miracles are common, they're not rare. They're just not rare. But we've been fed a belief set, it's rare, you have to be worthy, you might need a crisis. So we don't ask for miracles. We think, oh, well, I don't need it. I'm not ill, or I'm not going through a hardship. But miracles can happen all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been going through a new certification program that's called the Compassion Key recently. And the gentleman's name is Edward Mannix, and he talks a lot about how we can have these certain imprints within ourselves. He refers to as karmic imprints. And that some of us have the imprint that miracles can happen to everybody else, but they can't happen to me.
Yes.
And I think that's a great point that you just made, of that they're not rare. They really aren't. When you can open yourself up to the fact that miracles exist in every single moment. A flower blossoming is a miracle. A child being born is a miracle. Like, there's so many miracles that happen every day, but we have been, like you said, programmed to believe that miracles only look a certain way, or they can only show up in a certain way. And would you also say that with those specific belief patterns, that hinders their ability to actually be able to show up?
Yeah, we don't hold a high frequency of receiving them. So the spirit guides can't actually come through. We're locked in behind our social media all day. So we're not out actually allowing the universe to conspire to give us the miracles. The miracles sometimes have to come through social media. So spirit guides have to work really hard to use that as the forum to get the miracles. So someone might have, I know people have listened to me speaking on podcasts, and they said, Sheila, whatever you said, I needed to hear it that day. So that was the message I needed to hear. That is a miracle. There's nothing glamorous about it. There's nothing large. There's nothing, social media worthy. It's just this quiet moment where a message gets through the noise of life and it comes to us. That's what I'm speaking about, a miracle. Because in that moment, someone might have heard, quit the job, start your spiritual business. And they're like, oh my God, I'm going to do it today. So that is a miraculous moment where big changes, like big ripples are happening, in your life from that moment. So when I walked into my boss's office and I said, I want to work 4 days a week, that was a miraculous moment. One I remember forever, because from that, so many changes happened, because it was an empowered moment. It was brave. And so miracles are very quiet. When you receive a miracle, really get silent and write what you think the miracle is showing you, the sign, the repeated signs that are coming in, because it's the next, we want to know what our life purpose is. That is the roadmap. The miracle is the roadmap to fulfill your life purpose.
So I almost feel like in a way you're saying that synchronicities are in essence like mini miracles. Like the
Yeah,
synchronicity of somebody hearing a podcast and maybe they've never listened to a podcast on that particular podcast before, but they
yeah,
found yours that one
yeah.
day synchronistically and then heard exactly what they needed to hear in order to allow that big miracle to come through in that aha moment.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So Deepak Chopra calls it synchrodestiny, and he calls it a small cluster of synchronistic events that happen over a short space of time to lead you to your destiny. So I've had a lot of destiny moments. I've had a lot of arrows pointing in a certain way. And so I don't question anymore my life. When I had my early awakening, when I first discovered I was a medium and I was a finance manager at the same time, I questioned why this path. I don't get it. I no longer question it. I'm far on that, and that's why I mentor and coach in this space, which is probably why you do it as well, Adam. You're out of the questioning the why, and now the vehicle is the how. How am I showing up in the world? How do I write my next book? How do I, travel and speak more? So it's more the vehicle of how you move off the why once you follow and trust the synchronistic events. That is your why. The why is the synchronicity.
Yeah. And so many good things there, especially the fact that you bring up trust. It's trusting that, like you said earlier, that the universe is actually conspiring for you, not against you.
100%. Yeah. And when you're in the middle of your dark night, it might feel like it's not conspiring for you. When I lost my job and my relationship and everything broke down, I felt like, yeah, where is the universe here? Where is my spirit team? They were coming around and healing me, and the way I was turning up in the world wasn't going to serve me in the long term. I needed the breakdown. And so now when I go through dark nights and have breakdowns, I realize it's good. I'm being served, even though it's so painful at times.
Mhm. Yeah, it's almost like it's kind of like the phoenix. It has to burn through its own flames in order to rise from the ashes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. So, if people that are listening that are like, okay, I resonate with everything that you have to say, but I don't have any spirit guides, what do you have to say to them?
I'd have to say, look, you just probably haven't connected to them, and find a teacher or a meditation. I've got one on my website, if you want to reach out. So um, the guides are there to help you enact your soul purpose and your soul contract. So if you're going to a psychic medium and you're getting readings, they're connecting to your guides. If you're going to a teacher or a mentor, they're connecting to your guides for you, and they're offering a channeled type coaching experience for you. You definitely have guides. It's just about getting your vibration high enough so the connection becomes easy. So we get our vibration high enough by believing they exist. If that's taking a little bit of a jump for you, I would start by looking at the quality of your conversations you're having, the quality of your thoughts, quality of your diet, because this all impacts our auric field. And you've got to remember these guides, they're in the fifth dimension. They've got to come down into this very heavy, dense dimension here to connect to us. So if we're living a dense life, that may be why they're not coming through so clearly.
Mm. I love that you touch on that, and it's kind of like you're speaking on the terms of like the levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
Like I'm not sure if you're familiar with David Hawkins' work, but he did a lot of work in terms of figuring out what the various levels of consciousness are and talks about the different emotions in which people feel and embody keeps them at certain levels of consciousness. So what I'm hearing is that you're kind of saying as you can rise up those levels of consciousness, you're going to be able to be easier to contact from those guides than if you stay down in those lower levels of consciousness.
100%, 100%. Actually, I teach, through David Hawkins' literature. I love it. And that's why I teach about the concept of bravery, because the negative states from shame, guilt, anger, apathy, pride, all those are the negative states. And he says to overcome those negative states, we need to access courage, which is ranked at a consciousness level of 200. So at 200, the negative states dissolve But how do you dissolve that? Through the acts of courage. Through the acts of bravery and courage, you will feel the emotion of bravery and courage. And that is what lifts your state of consciousness higher. And that is what allows the guides to come through. So for the person that asks, I'm not able to hear it, it's like, well, what would courage do in your life to change your life to a higher vibrational life? So not that you're not feeling the negative states. The negative emotions are real and a part of everyday living. It's just we don't spend too long there in the negative states.
Mm. Yeah, it's fantastic that you touch on that, because I always like to refer to as emotions, they're like spices on a spice rack. Like you use them from time to time and they all have a purpose and they all have a relevancy, but it's not like you're going to use cayenne pepper in every single dish that you cook. I mean, maybe there's some
Exactly.
people out there that do, but for the most of us, that's probably not going to appeal to the palate.
Exactly.
Mm, beautiful. So you've touched on the different ways that you can connect with your guides, one of which is being the meditation. And you took us through a beautiful meditation on the Shift Network during that webinar that I was amazed at how clearly one of the guides that I already knew was on my team connected with me right then and there. Is that the same meditation that you have available on your website?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got a little mini course called the Spirit Guide Accelerator. Yeah, you can buy it. It's under products on my website, sheilav.co. Under that mini product, you get a spirit guide meditation, a teaching course on what spirit guides are. You learn how to receive signs from the universe, and you learn where you are on your spiritual path. It's a mini product I've created as like a little taster, like this pushes you out. To really understand how do you master your spiritual path at the very beginning stage.
Mm, beautiful, beautiful. Would you also say that there are maybe certain areas or certain places that can make it easier to connect with the guides? Like I always find that when I'm out in nature, I have a much easier time of connecting versus comparatively when I'm in like a busy city.
100%. I mean, everything's vibration. So anytime you can bring yourself to a place of stillness or quietness, you're going to allow the guides to connect in. So I'm very lucky. I live like a 2-minute walk from a beach here in Sydney. So
Mm.
I'll have an ocean dip, several times during the week. And I find always after I do, I feel so alive, refreshed, motivated. And then the guide connection comes in. It's like you're washing the worries of the day away. Also, look, you might be in a city and you may not be able to get out of the city, but putting some binaural beats in your ears, listening to some high frequency music on Spotify. Also, tapping into the energy of laughter and play. So when I've been really struggling with my emotions, I will watch a funny movie or a funny Netflix series just to bring my vibration up. So definitely nature can be something that we can use as a tool, but anything that can bring your emotional state up will allow you to connect to the guides.
It's beautiful that you touch on the laughter and play, because that's something that I have started to notice as a synchronicity for all of the guests that I've brought on, all of the spiritual teachers that I follow have always talked about getting in touch with that inner play. And getting in touch with that inner play is embodying that inner child, because their natural essence is joy, is laughter, is fun, is play.
Play is so important when we're on our spiritual path, because firstly it's going to feel difficult at times, and there might be a tendency to drop our frequency because we're just so overwhelmed by feeling lost, or a trauma comes up and we need to like go through some experiences that might take us near the pain of it or into the pain to resolve it. And on some level, that pain, that play and joy is a reprieve, or it's an antidote, or supports us through our healing process.
Wonderful. So, this is kind of a good moment to take a little bit of a segue into asking you the embrace and expand signature question of Sheila, what did you have to embrace in your life in order to expand into the person you are today?
I had to embrace my spiritual gifts and realize that I'm here to use them to speak to people, to write. I'm writing my second book. So it was very much really owning my spiritual gifts. And at that point, it was such a long time ago, at a point in the world where I wasn't sure the world would honor and accept me with these gifts. So embracing them unashamedly, bravely, learning to use them as a foundation to my business. That's what I needed to embrace to expand.
Hmm. That's such an amazing answer. And I think perfect point of just this time in which we all find ourselves, where there is so much reverence to those people that are just fully honoring themselves, being exactly who they know themselves to be unquestionably, and showing up in that way, giving everybody else the permission slip to do the same thing.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation, Sheila. I greatly appreciate your time and being here and sharing all of this wisdom with us.
Thank you so much, Adam, for having me on. It was such a pleasurable conversation, really interesting. We covered many topics. And hello to all your listeners. And I hope you've really got something out of the conversation today. Much love.
Well, thank you everyone for listening to another episode of the Embrace and Expand podcast. I will have all of Sheila V's information down in the show notes below. So if you want to get in contact with her via Instagram, her website, download some of those courses that she talks about, and keep an eye out for any of the future upcoming things like her new book. So thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.